Have you heard about the new Spielberg movie, Saving CISA? You're watching Textron Gang. Hey everyone, welcome. Happy Wednesday. Man, you know what Wednesday is, right? It's a hump day. These weeks are going so fast though, it seems to be a little more than a speed bump than a hump. But happy Wednesday to you. We've got a great lineup, great stuff to talk about today. Let's jump right into it. Let me introduce you to our speakers for today, our gang members for today. First of all, sporting a nice city view. That looks New Yorky to me. It's good to be home. He's a Futurum COO, Dan O'Brien. Hey, Dan, it's good to have you here.
Hey, Alan, good to be here.
Absolutely. Joining Dan is Kate Scarcella, who we found out is up in the Boston area. So we got the classic New York-Boston thing. I think the Yankees, they just played the Red Sox. But Kate, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And then, of course, joining us from out in the Rocky Mountains, our Futurum analyst, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell.
Good day, Rocky Mountain High.
Absolutely. Well, it's a little early for that, isn't it?
Is it ever?
Okay. Anyway, Mitch, let's jump in with you. You know, there was a big to-do, a big brouhaha a couple of months ago whether CISA was going to be funded. Of course, they've had some high-level departures there from friends of ours who we knew pretty well. And then the whole thing came up with funding CVE. Was MITRE going to get funded? Who's going to maintain CVE? Should we maintain CVE? Is it a private company or some sort of nonprofit that should maintain CVE? Well, CISA seems to have found this as its new mission for being, that they're going to save and maintain CVE. What's the story here?
Well, it's a bit of musical chairs, right? Do we have enough chairs to find funding for the CVE, or do we need private funding? Can it still be done by the government? It was pretty disruptive when this was announced a few months ago about this is no longer going to be funded. We're stepping away from it. It's got to be a private thing that the industry takes on. And while disruption is never fun, especially something as significant like this to the security industry, it did cause us to kind of relook at, so what are we going to do? And is there a better way to do this? And I think some of the reasons that people thought, should we still be funding it or doing it the way that we're doing CVEs, the common vulnerability definitions and database, is how accurate is it? Do we using it the right way in terms of really helping us not only communicate and collaborate on it, but how does it lead to outcomes that help us not only react to vulnerabilities, but potentially things that are out in the wild? So, yeah, CISA has stepped up and said we're going to move CVEs into what they're calling the quality era, where they're focusing not just communicating and collaboration, but more around accuracy and consistency and ensuring trustworthiness in the vulnerability information. I don't know if the trustworthiness of it was necessarily in question, but that's what they say that they're going to emphasize. So they put together a plan that they've set out in a white paper kind of form about strengthening the governance and modernizing how the program works and the infrastructure for it, and expanding the community participation, and making sure that it's maintained as a vendor-neutral kind of oversight. I don't know that those things, again, were in question necessarily, especially the vendor-neutral. I think it was pretty vendor-neutral, though you and I, Alan, we've been in security since early 2000s. CVEs themselves have led and spurred many a startup, including some. So it is an engine for new innovation to be able to use this information as we take it out to market. So we'll see where this goes next. And this is a pretty recent thing. I'm guessing the reaction is going to be pretty favorable. We just need some consistent. This is going to happen. It's supported. Whoever we get behind it, that's great. Let's move and make sure we have this information that we can work from.
Kate, as a security professional, what do you think about this one?
Well, first of all, from a MITRE perspective, I really had liked that group. I've always liked that group. I've always respected the techniques and the sub-techniques that they had. And so I would get concerned about having to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't understand personally, they talk about quantity to quality. And while it is so important that right now that we have the right information, and I fear that in this period of transition, that what we can't afford is to have the drop of critical information that actually is impacting, when I talk about critical infrastructure. And I worry that oftentimes we are having people who are leading these charges who don't know about cybersecurity, who haven't been around. Same here. I've really been doing this since, the early 2000s. And I continually find people who are jumping into this mix with opinions. And to me, it just continues to look like Groundhog's Day. And there's no building, there's no putting, we are going to do this and we are going to move forward as we do this with, it's almost like a spaghetti strategy. I'm going to throw a spaghetti on the wall and whatever sticks, we're going to go towards that. I don't feel like we're building. And with MITRE, what I saw was that they really looked at the attack methodology and how it's happening. And I think that strategy was crucial in helping us understand. And I'll just add one more thing, that it was in front of, C-level people over and over again. There was a commonality to the attack methodology. And what I would continue to hear is, how do we deal with privilege escalation? And how do I deal with lateral movement? And how, and those were the top two that I would continually be asked. And of course, we understand that because of the length of time that the bad actors are able to go undetected. And then privilege escalation, which we see over and over again, on gaining access. And I hate that we're messing so much with this personally. I do. So.
Absolutely. First of all, consistency in anything this government does is kind of an oxymoron, right? So this is this month's plan.
Yeah, that's true.
Next month will be a new plan. 2 months ago was a different plan. But let me take off my journalist hat and put on my security person's hat, right? Because I've been, Mitch, like you said, we've been security people for going on 30 years. And CVE, there are a lot of people who have valid concerns. We have too many goddamn CVE numbers. How can I track 200,000 or 300,000 CVE numbers and really try to, fortify my infrastructure with it, of using that? However, CVEs are a backbone of our security posture, of our security processes, right? Mitchell, yes, startups have been launched around CVE management. Careers have been made around managing to the CVEs. The MITRE organization, I think, was the perfect organization for this because it was quasi-governmental, right? You had governmental funding and governmental involvement, but with private as well. And they did a heck of a job all these years. Why fix something that's not that broke? And especially fixing something that that is in and of itself broke. Right? When Jen Easterly was shown the door there, when our friend Alan Friedman of S-Bombs was shown the door there, when they purged all of the people at CISA, right? To me, this seems like whoever's left at CISA is looking for a lifeline, and the CVE is their lifeline. Hey, we'll be able to get funding. We'll have a reason for being here if we say we maintain the CVE database. I am of the opinion that this is the perfect opportunity to correct a lot of wrongs and do it right. I would like to see an organization, a not-for-profit organization formed, whether it's under the auspices of the Linux Foundation or Eclipse or Apache or something new altogether, that comes out and says, we're going to do this right. We recognize what some of the issues were around the abundance of CVEs. There were just too many, but we're going to do it right. And we're not going to be subject to anyone's beck and call or political whims or what have you, right? Let's put together a consortium of industry, government, and not just the US government. Let's get the EU and some of the other responsible players in here. And let's form a worldwide foundation that manages our common vulnerability database, because it's too important to mess around with. And until we get to that point, this is all, to me, just theatrics. That's my
It's
point.
a great idea. It's a phenomenal idea.
So unfortunately, I already have a full-time job, so I can't be the one doing this. But if any of my security friends are out here watching, we need to do this. Maybe, you know what? I'm going to call my friends at RSA conference. This is a good thing for them to get involved.
I was just thinking RSA, why not start something up with?
Let's get a hold of them and see what they can do. Someone has to do this. It's
a good point, because I don't think the model is why fix what ain't broken, why break what ain't broken. So it's the Silicon Valley break things, and worry about the details later, and it'll shake out one way or another, which is the whole showing people to the door, and for political reasons or whatever the reasons are. It never made sense to any of us why you would pull the plug on MITRE, especially for funding this kind of activity, because it's really the lifeblood supporting the industry. Could we do some new things? Yeah, I'm sure we could. What do we do in the age of AI? Is there something we can do better? Is something we can do to help with either the accuracy or the fidelity or the response to CVEs that we do put together? And there's a lot of things I'm sure we can do in today's age, if you're going to not only modernize, but maybe rethink or redesign how we do this kind of a process. But in the meantime, you got to pay the bills. You got to protect the network. You got to protect all the critical infrastructure. You got to protect all of our, digital assets. So you just don't shelve that process and then kind of wait and see what forms. If a new galaxy forms up and starts to work on this problem, it's an ongoing threat. So really, in my view, I think the attitude or the approach we took is actually puts us at great risk, great national security risk, not just for our national infrastructure, but our businesses, Wall Street, all of those things, because we rely so heavily on CVEs. That said, you want a reason to go out and raise sponsorship funds, Alan, whether it's RSA or somebody else? I think companies would step up in a heartbeat to say, we'll contribute to that, and not just vendors. I think
I think end user enterprises would be
a lot of companies that would say, we want a neutral, yes, and we want a healthy vendor ecosystem that is putting the right kind of products. Matter of fact, we'd love to see a revitalization of that, see some new things happen, some new innovations in industry. So let's use this as a spark to really create the next era of how we do this.
Agreed.
It's a great idea. Yeah, love
Agreed.
it.
I mean, this needs public-private partnership, right? I mean, that's really the role for the government to play here. There's a lot of great efforts. There's a lot of folks who want to be part of a solution. Government really is kind of the organizer of last resort here, and the funder of last resort. But this is the equivalent of like getting rid of an FDA or an NTSB, right? It's just a little bit more in the background of everyday people. And so I think it's not getting the attention that it would if it was some of those more visible things. For things that people feel like they consume more regularly on an everyday basis. But this is a national defense and national security issue at the end of the day. Really need to step up and get this fixed.
I mean, people will know about it when it hits the fan. I'll tell you that.
Exactly.
So, all right, let's take a break here on The Gang. We're going to come back and we're going to continue our cyber focus today, talking about Microsoft. Are they grossly negligent when it comes to security? I don't know. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back here to TechStrong Gang. Senator Ron Wyden, I believe he's from Oregon, is asking the FTC to investigate Microsoft's gross cybersecurity negligence as a threat to national security. My goodness. Kate, I'm going to ask you to kick this one off.
All right. So the main allegations here were based on a breach from a hospital, Ascension Healthcare, where the ransomware attack impacted 5.6 million people. It's a lot. The entry point for this came from a malicious link, and a contractor, clicked on it, and, as typical, as we've seen, everything falls, right? So it went over to, reached escalating, that whole privilege escalation, Microsoft Active Directory, privilege management, and everything else. So the technical vulnerability here was a well-known attack for credentials via a weakness in Kerberos authentication. And the core part of this was Microsoft continuing the default support for RC4. And many of us know that one there. And basically, the argument here is that, why is this continuing when we've known for a very long time that better alternatives exist? The other question that he raises, and I think it's actually good logic here. I don't think we need to, beat up Microsoft, but the logic here does make sense to me. And that is, you talk about, Microsoft talks about, for critical infrastructure, we need to keep this open. We need to have backwards compatibility. But, RC4 is for 0.1% presently. And, and then going, so how does that make sense? Meaning that if you're trying to keep everything open for critical infrastructure, this 0.1% of the people who are still using RC4, and, but yet critical infrastructure is impacting, it has a possibility of impacting us all, like, at 90+%. So does that make sense? I mean, when do we finally just shut it off? I'm a big proponent of, let's just shut it off and let's see what happens. But that's me. So he raises the point about national security and systemic risk, and what can Microsoft do here to really change up this risk that he sees that's impacting critical infrastructure. So,
I have
Mitch?
thoughts. Mitch, you want to go?
Yeah, I do. I'm thinking of a conversation we had earlier on an earlier show about when so there's a quality issue with something coming out of the factory, just don't fix the item that has poor quality, you go back and fix the factory. I think we have a fundamental issue with security technologies, both the security standards that we put together, but also how they're implemented. And here's what I mean. I'll draw an analogy with IoT devices, right? Forever, there was never a way to update IoT software. It just went out there, it lived out there forever. The vendors didn't have a way to update it. They didn't really care. They didn't really maintain it. They just knew they were going to replace it, right? Because it was replaceable technology year over year. But it didn't get replaced. Things live out there for much longer, have much longer life. The same thing happened with security standards. So what do we see in IoT? The vendors start building and upgrade mechanisms to be able to do updates and things like that. The challenge, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but how could we reassess how we design the standards themselves and also implement them so we can upgrade them in place more easily without it being, a rip and replace, a major process? And this is everything from, PKI hierarchies and keys to Kerberos standards, encryption standards. I mean, it's a big effort to go from SHA-128 to 256. It is not a small thing. And again, maybe this is an area for AI. How could we redesign this process? I would invest my effort instead of, trying to rake Microsoft or whoever the next company is across the coals for, not making their customers keep up to date with the latest things. And really, let's address the systemic issue.
Yeah.
So,
And
okay, Kate. No, Kate, you go.
Well, I do absolutely agree with you, Mitch, that we need to, and it actually ties to our previous story, right? I think we're at a time right now where we really have to rethink what we're doing. And going forward, for many of us who have been doing this for a long time, we understand, we know the building blocks. It's time to build things right and, really think about redesigning things right. And yeah, I think it's a good point there, Mitch.
That's kind of why I got into DevOps, right? To get security right earlier on in the process. But let me take off my journalist hat this time and put on my lawyer hat. This is not gross negligence, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
right? There's legal definitions of gross negligence, and this ain't it. Right? This is a politician.
Politics, yeah.
Making hay. Now, could we make things better? Yeah. Could Microsoft be better about trustworthy computing, as Bill Gates called it all those years ago? Yes. Should we be complaining to the FTC and calling gross negligence on this? Absolutely not. That's slanderous. Kate, yes, 0.1% of people or organizations are using that protocol. And it only matters if you're one of those 0.1%, right? If you're one of those 0.1%, you're yelling bloody murder if you're making them change it. And so these things need to get done. The problem we have overall in security is we're always playing catch up. We're always 3 steps behind. So now we're going to try to fix this. Well, this morning, 140 packages in NPM from no less than CrowdStrike. I don't know if you guys saw this morning. 140 CrowdStrike packages are found to contain malware, some sort of new worm that's able to get into these packages and deposit malware that steals credentials and everything. It's kind of a new vector. It's a new worm. That's the problem in security. We're not the French in World War II. We can't set up a Maginot line so that the tanks come around us and leave us there.
Yeah.
You got to fight tomorrow's war, not yesterday's war.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. Go ahead.
And it's something that we have said on the show before, right, Alan? Like, we're not really planning for tomorrow. We're fighting yesterday. And the strategy, defense in depth, I mean, we've heard this, I've heard this a lot. Right?
Yeah, our whole life.
Right? Yeah. And I feel like and believe very strongly that it's not a strategy that has been effective. And if it was, we wouldn't be in the position that we were today. And when we talk about offense, a strategy of offense, it's so different. And if we don't start playing the offense strategy, and that doesn't mean let me start an offensive, let me start to attack countries. It just means that I have the ball. Hey, this is football season. I have the ball. How am I going to get down the field to, score points? And we don't think that way. But if we were to think that we have the ball, how does that strategy change with cybersecurity? And that's the question, I think. And it's perfect, with CrowdStrike,
In the immortal words of Hank Stram, let's matriculate down the field.
Get us an edumentation.
Alan, I think you said it well. I mean, you look at the rhetoric here and it kind of screams of, a politician with an agenda. Now, obviously, Microsoft is, somewhat been the poster child of create the problem, sell the solution. But, I don't think you can really hold the vendor too accountable here, right? I mean, the end user has some responsibility as well. And, at what point as a vendor is building a platform that is supposed to serve, almost everyone, do the edge cases where, people are kind of falling behind and, building up technical debt and, not kind of modernizing at some point, I think it falls back on the end user, not the vendor here.
It's really good example because that happened with this CrowdStrike, not the most recent. You're talking packages, but when the outage happened,
Yeah,
and of course,
the
Delta
update.
screamed bloody murder and sued them. But of course, they were the worst of the worst of not being able to go out and actually rebooting their systems. It was like, at what point does the consumer have some responsibility?
It's a shared responsibility model at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like your home, right? You can have locks on your door, but at the end of the day, if you don't lock your door, are we going to go see this?
Yeah.
But then you got the cloud, which adds another element to it. And it's sort of like, well, you just rent a home. And what responsibility does the landlord have? Right?
You put your lawyer hat back on, didn't you?
No, well, yeah. You never take the lawyer hat off. That's the problem with law school.
Lawyer, historian,
responsibility model a little bit, right? The cloud shifts the responsibility model a little bit more back to the vendor. But, there's a lot of control the end user still has, even in how they set up.
And that was always the thing about cloud security, Dan. Yes, the cloud vendor has capability to do some security there for you, but ultimately it's the end user who bears the responsibility when the stuff hits the fan. They don't want to hear that, AWS didn't do this for me. Well, no, you put your infrastructure on AWS. I used you. You're responsible. And that's the fact. But, I don't expect anything to happen out of this.
Alan, just to throw one other, not to get too futuristic about it, but I've talked for some time about software being not a static thing anymore. We used to release software, it would live out in production for months, maybe years sometimes. But now we live in a world where software gets updated near continuous, not quite continuous, but it's something that is evolving. And I describe it as software is not fixed like a rock, it's fluid like water. We have to think about security the same way. We have to stop thinking of static security. I put it out there and it lives until I do something about it. And we live in a world where the doing something about it takes people and resources and money and time, which is why things get left behind, because it's just not worth it to go deal with the problem that isn't a problem yet, right? Or nowhere a big enough problem. I think we have to think about designing security, not just in zero trust, but continuous zero trust, if you want to think of it that way.
This was JFrog's thing, Mitch, out in Swamp Up last week. So they call it liquid software.
Liquid software.
And it's versionless.
Yep.
There's no versions.
It's continuous.
It's continuous, but it's continuous security too.
Exactly. And that's I think the model of what we need to shift to of thinking, because we live in a world where we can do this now. And I know that was part of their AI announcements. And that's part of a way AI can potentially help us, especially, AI is going to be writing more and more code for us, not just at a point in time, but continuously in the background, creating new code that it's writing itself to do new things. Now, of course, how we regulate that, control that, are other issues. But the same thing can happen in security, right? So a response may actually be it creating a process or it writing some security protocol adjustments or changes or code that responds to an incident, because we're at such a volume. Nothing can, I go to these conferences where we're reducing alert fatigue. That's all great, but even at that level, we still have alert fatigue. We don't have enough people to respond to vulnerabilities in software, to attacks on network. This has to be automated, and the smarter we can make it, the better we protect ourselves, I feel.
If only we had a, very transparent, trustworthy central database of vulnerabilities that the agents could pull on, right?
What a great idea, Dan. Maybe we can do something.
Let me write that down. Thank you, Dan.
I even got a name for it.
AI needs good data, right?
You know what? But here's the sad part, guys. Kate, you're a security person. Mitch, Dan, you've been around the block enough. is anything really going to change? We sit here, we talk, we pontificate, we pundicize, if that's a word, all of this. Are we going to be having the same damn discussions in 2035? Maybe it won't be me discussing it, God willing, but are we going to have the same damn discussions 10 years from now?
Yeah. It's a game of leapfrog, continuous game of leapfrog. Yeah.
So I hate to be the kind of, it's all about money, but it is all about money. As soon as someone finds a model, an innovation, whatever, to make money doing it differently, they'll do it. They'll jump at it. And if it is successful, others will jump on that bandwagon. So I've as long as I've been in security, I feel like we're doing what we did when you and I started, 25 plus years ago. We're doing the same shit. We're just doing it a little differently with a little better technology, and it evolves and it improves and it evolves. Let's really get some serious innovation happening in security. Let's really invest not in the latest startup that solves some point little problem that does a little bit better than Cisco does it, and we're going to sell it back to Cisco. Yeah, we'll make money at it. Let's really invest creative and innovative ideas that are going to move the ball, not just 10 yards, but into the end zone and maybe into the next stage.
It is all about and law of diminishing returns, right? At a certain point, the spending the next bit of money doesn't justify the extra bit of risk management that you kind of get. Sorry, Kate.
No, I have to say that in my age, as I grow older, I've become a Pollyanna, and I don't know when this happened.
Who would have thought? All right.
You're self-admitted. That's the first step, is admitting the problem.
But I believe that we're going to change this. I really do. This is my Pollyannish, I believe that we're going to do this. I believe that we are going to solve this problem only because, if nothing else, because we have to. And I believe in, I wasn't a big adopter of AI, but now I'm like, man, AI, let's embrace it. Let's see where we can take this, and let's change up this story. So in 10 years, I can't do this over and over again. Like, in my mind, like, we have to change this narrative where this is going. So the Pollyanna in me lives on, and we are going to have a different story in, 3 years. 3 years.
3 years is ambitious.
God bless. To your lips, to God's ears.
I believe in. I was going to ask you to get into politics, Kate.
Amen. I was looking for a church there going on.
All right. Hey, I believe we need to take a break right here. We're going to come back and we're going to change it up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about AI, because we don't talk enough about AI. And but we're going to talk about stock markets and all kinds of good stuff. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back here to TechStrong Gang. I had an interesting conversation with my friend John Willis today, and we were talking about the progression of users of AI and of ChatGPT. And we tend to, we live in a bubble. We're tech people, and we think everybody's using AI and everybody knows what it is and everyone knows all the history. When the fact of the matter is, yes, OpenAI is probably the fastest to 100 million users of any technology ever. It's cut and dry. However, 100 million users plus still pales in comparison in a world of 7 billion people. And so we forget. And OpenAI, the whole OpenAI not-for-profit, the Microsoft involvement, even in the 100 million users, I bet, an overwhelming majority are not aware of the unique corporate governance and structure that OpenAI had or has. And, absolute money corrupts absolutely. And with all this money in there, people are trying to figure something out. Dan, I've laid it out for you. Why don't you finish it up and take us into what's happening now?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Alan. So as you mentioned, founded as a nonprofit, the nonprofit controls, the potential, profit entity, a super complex corporate structure and governance model. Let's lay out the facts, right? Microsoft's got 13 billion into OpenAI. Most of what they've been, negotiating around is, really the restructuring approval needed to take this thing into the for-profit world. The equity stake that Microsoft will get, the revenue sharing agreement, the technology access and the AGI clause, and then all the commitments on safety, right? Early on in the partnership, it was focused more around model exclusivity, Microsoft being the primary cloud, recouping their investment, with profits. And, though I think OpenAI has come out and said, probably not profitable until 2029, looking at $44 billion in operating losses, between now and that time frame. But, you take the financial backdrop of this thing, there's an incredible amount of value creation happening there. There's also an incredible need for funding moving forward. And, ultimately this move, I think, is about, securing the capital needed to, kind of meet the CapEx requirements of continuing to drive the business forward, right? The ability to, to tap an IPO potentially next year, raise a significant amount of capital. We've already seen this in, some of the talk around the Stargate project with SoftBank and Oracle, numbers like $300 billion being floated. I think OpenAI is targeting a valuation of about a $500 billion, right? And, Microsoft seems to come out with, something that's probably on the order of a couple $100 billion. So, something roughly equivalent to, 8 to 10% of, Microsoft's market cap is kind of the amount we're talking about here. So it's not insignificant at all. But ultimately, I think both parties realize that they need to get past this, kind of restructuring effort to really extract the value from it. And, everybody's willing to negotiate on, kind of the terms that need to change moving forward from what they've been, to fund the CapEx and really seize the opportunity.
I've got a few things here, Dan. First of all, to your point, I just want to make sure our audience realizes this. That $13 billion Microsoft invested was not your usual investment where they got stock or even options or warrants or anything. It was $13 billion as part of a rev share, right? And Microsoft was going to recoup that money in rev share and profit. Secondly, my understanding is just last week, Larry Ellison, got about a 34% bump into his net worth because Oracle came out that OpenAI is pledging $300 billion to Oracle alone for this AI infrastructure. So Dan, if they're going to raise $500 billion, you're talking about giving away 60% of it in one-to-one customer, to one project, one transaction. They need to raise, I think, a couple of $1 trillion. They need to raise NVIDIA kind of money just to pay these bills, to pay that piper. That's a lot of cabbage. It's a lot of cabbage, right? Think about what you're talking about. The other thing, though, is I'll mention this and then open it up to Mitch and Kate and Dan. You want to come back? Here's the fly in the ointment. Our friend Elon. Don't forget, he was a founder there. And he supposedly was big into this not-for-profit piece of it. He didn't like what they would do. Well, there's back and forth about why he left, but one of the reasons is he didn't like what they were doing. He, of course, has XAI and Grok, right? He's pledged to open source that. Everybody's pledging to open source everything while they're all running to the trial to feed.
OpenAI, yeah.
So, what I can only imagine the lawsuits flying, but I'll throw it back to the gang. What do you guys think?
I just related to, if it can be related to my own personal experience, having run a for-profit company at a much tiny fraction of a size of what we're talking about here, owned by a nonprofit company. And that is, even in that particular relationship, I'm not going to mention the specifics of it, but it complicates things when a nonprofit owns for-profit entities. Now, the hospital systems have figured this out, because a lot of the hospital systems are set up that way. A nonprofit owns all these for-profit companies. But when you start out with more of an altruistic nonprofit, that was what originally OpenAI was about, is doing this with safety and, protections built around what we want AI to become. And of course, then the for-profit part of it starts pushing it outside of the bounds of that original goal. I think some of that fabric of that original mission still complicates the factor here. And at some point you have to say, look, we're not, the ownership of this is not about that mission anymore. We are about managing for-profit entities through this nonprofit company, et cetera, in the structure, and let it be what it's going to be, or spin it off and do your own thing as a nonprofit. Just stop the complexities of it. Not saying that this still isn't complex at these numbers at this size. It's still hard for me to kind of keep those numbers in my head. But I think that is also an undercurrent of this too, because many of us said, what does OpenAI want to be when it grows up? Well, I think it wants to be a company that makes a whole ton of money, is what the market's saying.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, do you guys remember when Tesla, in the heyday of Tesla, they were the only game in town for EVs. They had like 3x the market cap of Ford and GM. And one has to look and say, if that's a car company, and these are car companies, I'm not saying Tesla is not without value, but is it 3x of Ford? 3x of GM? I think we're talking, correct. I'm not a stock market expert, but NVIDIA is at about a $4 trillion market cap, right? I believe Microsoft's like at a $2 trillion market cap. Yep. OpenAI has to be approaching that to afford the kind of deals that they're talking about. And keep in mind, Dan, as you said, this is a company that's going to bleed 44 billion red dollars between now and 2029 or something like that, right? 44 billion, that's an insane amount of money.
Well, investors are discounting the future, potential profits and cash flow, and voting that there's still a lot of money to be made here, right? And I think what they're trying to do is really kind of remain a little bit true to the original mission about really advancing AI safety. And the nonprofit may end up with, a sizable endowment to drive AI safety priorities while, kind of separating from the for-profit entity. So I think they're trying to get to the win-win here. Certainly, the original investors in OpenAI are going to win. Microsoft is going to win very big. And it seems like they're trying to maintain, some of that credibility around the other mission, the original mission, and really fund that AI safety thing through the equity stake.
Do you think, Dan, that sort of solving that through some kind of a structure, funding that original mission, if that happened, is that sort of separate the conflicting concerns and lets OpenAI be the for-profit company it needs to be, and let OpenAI, that's the nonprofit, be what it needs to be, and stop complicating the concerns? Do you think that's standing in the way of some of this?
I think it is. I think that, and a fair number of lawsuits are standing in the way of this. But
yeah.
I think a fair number of lawsuits, yeah, for sure. But let me just, not devil's advocate, but let me give you another spin on this. I was reading a post today by a PhD in STEM, a woman, who was talking about, they bought Johnny Ives, OpenAI, bought Johnny Ives' company for about $6.5 billion. And supposedly we're going to start seeing these consumer products coming out next year. And the rumor is that one of them, basically it's not a phone, there's no screen, but it's a device. I don't know if the pin's on you or it's in your glasses or wherever, but it's a device that's your constant companion. It kind of whispers in your ear and tells you, it summarizes conversations you're having and what people are saying. It tells you where you go and what you have to do. It reminds you, it is your alter ego. And, it doesn't have a name yet. There's no pictures of it, but that's kind of the buzz about what this new device, that Johnny Ives' team is working on. And Sam Altman says that alone That alone is another $1 trillion business for OpenAI. So I'll close it out with this. If they go public, I'm in.
Friends and family.
I hope so. All right. Hey, if we have nothing else, we're going to wrap up this version of the gang. What a great conversation today, guys. Dan, Kate, Mitch, thank you so much for participating. Thank you out there for watching. As usual, we have a full lineup of TechStrong TV immediately following the gang if you're watching this Wednesday morning live. If not, you can go to TechStrong TV or the TechStrong TV OTT app, where we have not just TechStrong TV, but Tech Field Day. We've got some 6.5 Media, some Futurum Group stuff. You can get that on iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon. So check out the OTT app. We'll be back tomorrow with a fresh gang and fresh topics. Until then, on behalf of TechStrong, Futurum, and everyone else here, we're out.